Prof, I want to see your reactions. You kind of turned around and now you're standing in front of this installation. Death and dismemberment. There's a lot of violent death images that you see. Now with these heads, how have they been displayed?
I love that's well, first of all, it's an arrow.
Okay.
It's heads, it draws me in, but at the same time, it prevents me from getting close.
This kind of victorious end to the perpetrator's actions, at the same time points to the fact that it's very organized, premeditated. So the idea that, oh, these things just happen as a kind of chance war event is really refuted by works like this.
Destruction of culture is often part of a genocidal process. Not only are people killed and regular property destroyed or stolen, but also in some genocides, the remnants, the artistic, cultural remnants of the people who were destroyed is also often destroyed. In the case of the Armenian genocide, a huge destruction took place of churches, monasteries, libraries, and this kind of destruction is also a crime against humanity. It's an artistic crime against humanity on top of the bloody crime against humanity. Just like different peoples of the world, each people, each civilization adds something to the richness, to the wealth of humanity. So when a culture is destroyed, it's like tearing out a page out of an encyclopedia, or taking out pages out of an encyclopedia, the pages you don't want. And indeed, it is a crime against humanity of a different sort, and a crime that has a more long-term impact because human civilization is diminished because things that cannot be replaced have been eliminated.
During the Wannsee Conference in January 20th, 1942, in which the Nazi leadership discussed the eradication of European Jewry, it was said that during the discussion of what was to be called the final solution, Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Gestapo and second in command of the SS, was asked, "Would not the world react in horror in such an act of genocide?" And he is said to have replied, "Who remembers the Armenians?" What has always struck me about that remark was his unflinching belief that the world wouldn't care if millions of people were destroyed. The cold and calculating response left me with a sense of personal dread, to be living in a world in which human life was nothing more than a means to a political end. I wondered how could people be so callous and cold towards one another. My young mind searched for an explanation that seemed to me unexplainable. Since then, I learned more about Cambodia, Rwanda, and the Darfurian genocides, the eradication of the Native Americans, as well as the destruction of millions of Africans during the Middle Passage and slavery. I then resolved myself to do what I could to not only bring these atrocities to light, but to bring forth a new understanding of ourselves in which such inhumanity to man would be seen as not only the antithesis of our sense of humanity, but also a point from which we could build a new sense of our collective humanity in which such atrocities would be seen by all as our own.
This is an extraordinary exhibition. I was here 2 weeks ago, and I was astounded at the number of people who came here. I thought there would be 100, maybe 150. Must have been 1,000 people here. And it was of profound value in generating extraordinary historical consciousness. The issues raised in this exhibition, Man's Inhumanity to Man, are issues that I've tried to deal with for the 40 years that I've taught at the University of California. These issues have infused my teaching for all of those decades. I've tried to show how art has been particularly valuable in generating understanding of society, of politics, and above all of historical understanding. And this exhibition is so remarkable in showing how art can generate historical consciousness, above all, the value of historical memory, so desperately important at this time in human history.
Well, people like denial, because denial means that they don't have to take responsibility for what happened in the past. And we use a sense of denial as in the eradication of the Native Americans, where we try to pretend that these instances never occurred. And it bothers me that somehow, thinking that somehow something didn't occur, we then believe that was the case. If we try to convince ourselves, because of one reason or another, maybe it makes us feel uncomfortable about things, that things are not what they were. As Professor Blum was talking about Jim Crow laws, the problems that we have in our country at all, where we act like they've never existed, and somehow, therefore, we don't have to think about it. I think that does a detriment to us and to the future.
In terms of consequences of admitting a genocide, there should be a consequence. What that is can be defined in different ways, but the Turkish government knows then one cannot admit to a genocide and just walk away, say, I'm sorry. The US government has apologized to Japanese Americans for internment during World War II. Germany admitted the Holocaust and paid reparations. That is a fear, but it's called justice. And ultimately, my feeling is Turkey loses more through the denial than they would lose if there's some kind of compensation. The denial itself is eroding Turkish identity. It's like a cancer. And many Turkish officials, not Turkish officials, Turkish scholars are speaking about this, that Turkish identity and the level of democracy in Turkey is being damaged by the denial of the genocide. So admitting to it, I think, would benefit Turkey in the long run overall.
When we talk about the Armenian genocide and Armenian music, one name immediately comes to mind, and that name is Gomidas. In today's program, I will focus on the music and life of Gomidas, and through which I would like to make some illustrations about the genocide, Gomidas and his music, and eventually his influence on Armenian arts and culture. The importance of Gomidas and his musical output, which occurred before the genocide, is articulated brilliantly by pianist Serush Karadzian in his liner notes of the Gomidas Songs album, which he recorded with his wife soprano Isabel Bayraktaryan. I quote, "Gomidas purified Armenian music of all foreign influences and gave it back to its people, laying the foundations of a national musical culture. This explains his rightful recognition as father of Armenian classical music. One shudders to imagine what might have happened had Gomidas not begun his mission well before 1915. After the genocide, nothing survived. Churches were destroyed, pilgrimages and all the ceremonies accompanying them came to an end, and villagers clinging to their land and singing its praises were killed or deported. Nothing was left to compile or compare, let alone preserve for future generations. Gomidas came forward at the 11th hour to redeem a vital characteristic of a 4,000-year-old civilization that was eventually uprooted from its cradle."